Hands up. Right now. He shouted it like he was cornering a foreign insurgent, then laughed when she held out her military ID. That little card? Please. Folks like you buy that garbage online. You think some cheap black impersonation of a soldier is fooling me? First Lieutenant Monica Hayes had survived combat zones with more dignity than this moment. She had saved lives in uniform. Yet Officer Sean Riley mocked her, doubted her, and fired his weapon inside her own home, stealing the hearing from her left ear. He had no idea he had just shot an active-duty Army officer, a decorated hero, a woman the Pentagon itself would soon defend. Before we go deeper into this story, tell me where you're watching from today, and be sure to subscribe to the channel and give me a like, so you never miss stories that matter. Monica had not expected trouble that night. She was home on extended leave, moving with the quiet discipline of someone who had spent more nights in military barracks than in her own bedroom, even on leave. She stayed alert, boots near the couch, phone within reach, her thoughts moving with the calm of someone trained to survive chaos. At 2:14 in the morning, she heard a scraping sound near the kitchen window. Slow, measured. Not the sound of a house settling, not the sound of nature. It had weight behind it, the kind that signals a human hand. Her instincts lifted her from the couch before she fully registered the danger. She checked the front door camera. Nothing there. Another scrape followed. Metallic. Intentional. She did not panic. She did not call out. She simply lifted her phone and dialed the number she knew by heart, her voice staying steady from the first word. This is First Lieutenant Monica Hayes, United States Army. I have a possible intruder at my residence. Request immediate patrol. She gave her information with the same clarity she used when calling in coordinates overseas. She repeated her name. Her tone stayed even. She hung up and positioned herself where arriving officers could see her clearly. Lights on, hands visible. Nothing in either hand. Nothing rushed or confusing. She believed clarity would protect her. When the officers arrived, Monica stood and opened the door slowly, her hands raised. The silver bar of an Army First Lieutenant was still pinned to her hoodie, visible in the porch light. She greeted them with respect. Lieutenant Hayes, thank you for coming. Officer Kevin Morales recognized the rank first. His expression shifted, and he gave a small nod. Officer Sean Riley saw none of it. He saw only a black woman in a hoodie, standing in a home he didn't believe belonged to someone like her. Bias had walked through the door with him, and it took control before reason had a chance. Monica stepped back, giving them space. She explained the noise she heard. She pointed to the kitchen with deliberate, slow movements. She had always understood the importance of body language, especially around weapons. Everything she did was measured. She moved ahead of them toward the kitchen. A pot of water still sat on the stove from earlier that night. She reached to move it off the burner. She expected calm questions. Instead, she got the sound of fear disguised as authority. Riley's voice cut sharply through the air. "Drop it!" His tone cracked like a whip. It startled even his partner. Monica froze, surprised by the sudden intensity. "It's just boiling water." She did not lift it higher. She did not turn toward him. She only tried to explain. Her tone held no threat. Her posture stayed open. Her hands were visible. Riley either did not see or chose not to see. His mind had already written a story that didn't match reality. To him, a black woman with a pot in her hand was a threat. No matter what her rank, no matter what she had survived, no matter how calmly she spoke. The gunshot shattered the air before Kevin Morales could even finish saying, "Wait." In the tight space of the kitchen, the sound exploded with a force that cut through Monica's world. The bullet tore through the area just below her left clavicle. Pain hit her like a sudden wave. Her knees buckled. She slid down the counter. The pot fell to the floor, water spreading in a hot pool. She heard a ringing, sharp and immediate. Then she heard nothing at all on her left side. Silence swallowed half her world. She touched her collar instinctively, searching for stability. Her vision blurred. Her breath grew shallow. Kevin stared at his partner in disbelief. His body camera had captured everything. He knew what he saw: a woman who had been calm, cooperative, identified, unarmed, respectful, a woman who had called for help. Riley stood over her, breathing hard, his weapon still raised. His voice broke the moment. She lunged. She was coming at me. The lie was fast, desperate, and unmistakable. Monica tried to speak. Her voice was a whisper. "I'm not a threat." But she could already feel the cold coming through her limbs. She was fighting to stay present, fighting to make sense of a betrayal that struck deeper than the wound itself. She had survived firefights overseas. She had saved civilians under pressure. She had done everything her country asked of her. She never expected the danger to come wearing a badge inside her own home. She never expected the threat to be the person she called for help. As she drifted in and out of awareness, she felt the weight of the moment settle heavily. The bullet had taken more than sound from her left ear. It had taken a belief she once held tightly. The belief that calling for help would lead to safety. In the minutes before the ambulance arrived, she lay on the floor, surrounded by the sharp smell of gunfire and boiling water, trying to keep her eyes open. She didn't know yet that the world would soon know her name. She didn't know that her chain of command would be alerted within hours. She didn't know that a video from next door would capture everything Riley tried to hide. All she knew was that she had been shot by the very people she trusted to protect her, and the country she served was about to find out. The patrol cars reached Monica's street in just under 7 minutes, their arrival cutting through the stillness she had held together with discipline alone. She stood inside the doorway, hands raised, her posture straight, her breath steady, refusing to let fear rewrite the habits she had earned through 14 years of service. When officers Sean Riley and Kevin Morales stepped onto her porch, she greeted them with the same courtesy she used with senior officers in the field. "Lieutenant Hayes," she said calmly, the silver bar on her hoodie catching the light. "Thank you for the fast response." Kevin recognized her rank immediately. His nod carried respect. Riley, however, let his eyes slide past her identification, past her composure, past her service, settling instead on the single thing he chose to see in his mind. A black woman in a home late at night did not fit the story he carried with him. He dismissed her introduction before she even finished it. Monica stepped back slowly, giving them a clear view of her hands and the open space around her. She repeated the sound she heard near the kitchen window. She spoke steadily, measured, the way she briefed soldiers before entering a tight corridor overseas. She kept her tone neutral, respectful, aware that she had called them there and trusted they would handle the situation professionally. She walked ahead of them toward the kitchen, her movements deliberate and open. The stove was still warm from earlier. A small pot of water she had heated for tea sat waiting for her to return. She reached toward it only to move it off the burner. She never lifted it high. She never turned her body in their direction. She only acted with the care and clarity she had practiced her entire adult life. Riley's voice came without warning, sharp, accusing, loud enough to shake the air. "Drop it." Kevin jerked slightly at the sudden force behind the command. Monica froze. Her fingers tightened around the handle of the pot. Confusion flickered across her face. "It's just boiling water," she said softly. "Not defensive, not confrontational, just factual." She held the pot low, near the stove, her movements slow enough for a child to understand she meant no harm. Riley's face hardened in an instant. To him, the pot was not water, it was intent, it was threat, or at least, he claimed it was. His hand rose, his stance shifted, his breath grew fast and uneven. Kevin began to say something. "Wait." But the word barely left his lips before the shot exploded. The sound inside the tight kitchen was violent. swallowing the space around them. The force pushed Monica back as the bullet tore through the edge of her collarbone, ripping nerves that would never heal again. Her knees buckled. She struck the counter before sliding down toward the floor. The pot hit first, water spreading across the linoleum. The heat of the spill was swallowed by the sharper heat of her own blood. A ringing burst through her head, then silence. Half the world vanished in an instant. Her left ear went dark, shutting down as if someone had severed the line between her body and the air around her. She tried to inhale, but her breath caught beneath the sudden pain. Her fingers brushed the front of her shirt, wet, warm, spreading. Morales stood frozen, his camera still recording everything Riley had done and everything Monica had not done. "What did you do?" Kevin whispered, his voice cracking under the weight of the moment. Riley stepped forward, breathing hard, gun still pointed, chasing a false sense of control. She lunged. He said roughly, "She came at me." His words fell out fast, shaky, built on panic rather than truth. Kevin knew instantly that the claim was false. He had watched Monica's movements. He had seen her hands. He had heard her calm voice. She had done nothing but show respect. Riley, however, was already rewriting the scene to justify the shot. Monica lay on the floor, fighting to stay conscious. Her right ear caught faint echoes of footsteps. Her left ear heard nothing but the inside of her own pulse. She tried to speak, but her voice slipped out as a breath. "I'm not a threat." Her words barely rose above a whisper. She pressed her hand against the wound and felt her fingers trembling. She tried to turn her head, but even that motion sent pain through her chest. She had survived ambushes overseas with clearer thoughts than she had now. Her mind was trying to piece together what had just happened. But the betrayal pulled at her harder than the wound itself. She had called for help. She had identified herself. She had stood still. She had followed every rule. Yet she was on her own kitchen floor, bleeding from a shot fired by someone who never took a full second to listen. Kevin knelt beside her, his voice catching. "Lieutenant, stay with me." He pressed his radio to call for medical support. Riley paced behind him, muttering the same lie with increasing desperation. "She tried to attack me. She tried." Panic had replaced reason, fear had replaced judgment, and neither could be undone. Kevin looked back at him with disbelief, realizing that the entire truth now rested inside the lens of the camera clipped to his own chest. A camera Riley had switched off minutes before entering the kitchen. Kevin's had remained on. His footage captured Monica's calm introduction, her raised hands, her respectful tone, her visible military ID, and the sound of Riley's voice spiraling into a place that had nothing to do with safety. Monica drifted in and out, her body growing heavier with each passing second. She felt the cold through her back. She felt the warmth of the blood beneath her. She tried to reach for her dog tag beneath her hoodie, but her hand wouldn't rise. She steadied her breath, determined to stay awake. She had fought to save civilians overseas. She had lifted people from floodwaters in Afghanistan. She had survived artillery and ambush. She could survive this too. But nothing in her training had prepared her for the feeling she carried now. The feeling of being betrayed inside her own home by the very institution meant to protect her. The world narrowed to a small circle of light above her. Kevin kept speaking, trying to keep her conscious. Riley kept pacing, trying to shape the story into something he could survive. Monica stared at the ceiling, fighting for every breath. She didn't know that her neighbor's camera had caught the flash of the gun. She didn't know that her sister would be awakened soon by the news. She didn't know that soldiers at Fort Leonard Wood would hear her name before dawn. All she knew was that she was alone in a room with two officers, one panicking and one breaking apart, and that the system she trusted had fractured in an instant. The ambulance arrived 11 minutes after the shot. Paramedics rushed in, working around the water on the floor, lifting her onto a stretcher. Riley kept repeating his lie. Kevin stayed silent, knowing the truth was engraved in digital memory, waiting to be examined by people who understood facts better than fear. As they carried her out, Monica's vision blurred a final time, her thoughts drifting toward the one truth she felt through the pain. She had survived combat. She would survive this too, but nothing would ever be the same after tonight. Monica survived the ambulance ride by holding on to one thin thread of awareness, drifting in and out as trained hands worked over her shoulder and chest. She felt pressure, heat, then cold air as she entered the emergency bay. Dr. Elena Torres took one look at the wound and moved instantly, calling out orders with a tone that allowed no hesitation. The bullet had shattered the collarbone, torn vessels in its path, and severed the auditory nerve feeding her left ear. The damage was deep, but Elena had saved soldiers before. She recognized the look of a fighter clinging to consciousness. She refused to let the moment slip. She stabilized Monica's breathing, slowed the bleeding, reset the alignment of the bone, and demanded extra hands in the room when she realized the nerve damage was permanent. She saw the faint burn pattern from the muzzle flash along Monica's skin. She saw the angle of entry. She saw everything she needed to know about what happened in that kitchen. And she quietly made sure every scrap of evidence was documented. No shortcuts, no gaps. She treated Monica as if she were a family member, as if this injustice had stepped into her own home while the medical team worked. Paperwork moved through digital channels faster than anyone expected. The call Monica placed to 911 included her full rank and her duty status as an active duty Army officer. By the time the sun began to rise, that information had reached her unit at Fort Leonard Wood. At 4:30 in the morning, an operations officer called the division's commanding general. He listened in silence, then rose from his desk, picked up the phone, and made a call to the Sangamon County Sheriff before dawn. His voice was calm, but firm. "One of my officers has been shot in her own home. I expect immediate accountability." Leaders at the installation gathered in a briefing room before sunrise, studying the known facts, waiting for confirmation that she was alive. None of them had ever seen a case like this. None of them imagined that a first lieutenant with the soldier's medal would be lying in an Illinois intensive care unit because a police officer dismissed her rank, her training, and her humanity before noon. A message spread quietly across multiple Army networks. Active duty officer shot by local police in her own residence. Status: critical but stable. Soldiers who had served with her began calling one another. Some had been with her during the flash flood in Afghanistan. They remembered the night she pulled 15 civilians through rushing water while the ground shook beneath them. They remembered her voice directing the evacuation. They remembered how she stood firm while chaos washed around her. Those memories moved through the corridors of the Pentagon as officers briefed senior leaders. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs was informed before lunch. The Secretary of the Army received a detailed summary hours later. No one needed to exaggerate anything. The facts were shocking enough. At the same time, a young woman in the house next door, 24-year-old college student Sarah Carter, was sitting on the edge of her bed, hands shaking, as she watched the video she had recorded from her window. She had seen the flash of Riley's gun. She had heard the words he spoke before the shot. She had seen Monica standing still. She had captured the truth for 12 hours. She tried to decide whether releasing it would get her in trouble. She finally chose to act when she heard that Monica was still alive. She uploaded the recording to her phone, typed a short caption, and posted it to social media. The video spread within minutes. It showed Monica raising her hands. It showed her identifying herself. It showed Riley's tone collapse into contempt. And it showed the shot within an hour. The view count exploded within 2 hours. National outlets picked it up. And by the end of the day, the Pentagon's communications office received more calls from reporters than it had in months. The Department of Defense issued a rare public statement by late afternoon. Its words were brief, controlled, and unmistakably serious. One of our officers was shot in her own home while exercising her rights as an American citizen. We are monitoring the investigation closely and expect full accountability. The Army never used language like that lightly. It signaled that the case was no longer local. It was now a matter of national concern. It was no longer about one officer in Illinois. It was about the integrity of the uniform and the protection of those who served in the hospital. Monica drifted awake as evening approached. Pain radiated through her chest, but her mind moved with a slow clarity. Her sister, Jasmine, sat beside her. Her voice was steady but heavy, her eyes holding grief and fire in equal measure. Monty. The Army knows. Everybody knows. She held Monica's hand carefully. The video is everywhere. Monica blinked, trying to process the words. She wanted to speak, but the strain pressed against her sternum. Jasmine leaned closer. Your soldiers are calling. Your commanders are calling. They aren't letting this get buried. A tear slid down Monica's cheek. Not from fear, but from the realization that the battle she had just entered was larger than anything she had faced in uniform. Federal investigators arrived before midnight. They did not wait for a press cycle. They did not wait for local authorities to process statements. They moved quickly, requesting body camera footage, dispatch logs, and all available audio from the scene. They already knew Riley's camera had been turned off. They already knew Kevin Morales' camera had remained on. They interviewed hospital staff. They spoke with Dr. Torres privately. She provided the medical details, the angle of the wound, the evidence she had preserved. She did not raise her voice, but her tone made it clear that she understood exactly what had happened. At Fort Leonard Wood, Monica's commander continued making calls. He wanted transparency. He wanted justice. He wanted the nation to understand the caliber of the woman lying in the hospital bed. He reviewed her record again. Soldier's Medal, commendations, years of exemplary service. He knew this case would define more than one career. It would test the integrity of institutions on every level. The Army was preparing to stand behind her publicly. Congress was already asking questions. Investigators were coordinating between federal agencies and the military's Criminal Investigation Division. All of it moved with the force of an institution that refused to let one of its own be dismissed or forgotten. By the time the day ended, one truth settled over the country like a weight too heavy to ignore. This was no longer the story of a single gunshot in a quiet neighborhood. It was the story of what happens when a decorated American soldier calls for help and receives violence instead of protection. It was the story of an officer who had survived war abroad only to be nearly killed in her own kitchen. It was the moment when the Army, the Pentagon, and the nation itself began to turn toward Monica Hayes, not as a victim, but as a voice the country would soon have to hear. Federal investigators worked with a precision that left no room for misinterpretation. By the morning after the shooting, they had already secured the dispatch logs, the 911 call, and the preliminary statements from the officers. They requested both body cameras immediately. Riley's camera showed only one thing, an abrupt blackout exactly 11 seconds before the shot. No malfunction, no technical error. He had pressed the button himself. Kevin Morales' camera, however, captured everything Riley hoped to bury. Its audio recorded Monica's calm greeting, her identification as a first lieutenant, the respectful tone she used, the way she guided them toward the kitchen. It also captured Riley's words immediately after firing, sharp and instinctive, spoken before he had time to craft a story. Black suspect lunging with a deadly weapon, lieutenant or not, doesn't matter. His voice cracked, breath fast, revealing fear and bias wrapped together. Kevin froze when he heard the playback later, realizing those words would follow Riley for the rest of his life. Investigators studied the footage frame by frame. They noted Monica's posture, her hands, her tone. Everything she did reflected discipline, calm, and cooperation. There was no lunge, no attack, no movement that resembled aggression. Her body turned only slightly toward the stove, her arm reaching for the pot at waist level. The video showed Kevin stepping forward and speaking at the same moment the shot rang out. It showed Riley firing without waiting, without assessing, without listening. The audio captured Riley exhaling sharply, as if trying to steady himself after a reaction he couldn't control. And then the lie, fast, defensive, and rehearsed even as it was spoken. Investigators wrote it down word for word. They moved next to Monica's military record. When they opened her file, they paused. This was no ordinary officer, no ordinary soldier. Monica Hayes had built a record that any commander would be proud to sign. 14 years of service. A soldier's medal, awarded only for heroic acts not involving direct combat. Several commendations. A spotless disciplinary history. In Afghanistan. She had carried civilians through flash floods while other soldiers held lights above the raging water. She had led evacuations under pressure and kept her team alive in moments when panic could have taken over. The Army documented her performance with the kind of praise reserved for the best. When investigators delivered these findings to the U.S. Attorney's Office, the reaction was immediate. They understood what it meant for the case. They understood the weight of the uniform, and they understood the gravity of the lie Riley had spoken. The turning point came when Kevin Morales requested a private meeting with federal agents. He arrived wearing the same uniform he had worn the night before, his face drawn, his voice unsteady. He asked to speak off the record first. They declined. Everything needed to be on the record now. He nodded, swallowed hard, and sat down. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he lifted the small memory card from his breast pocket. "This is the unedited audio," he said quietly. I didn't turn my camera off. He did not defend Riley. He did not soften the truth. He told them about Riley's behavior before they entered the house. He told them how Riley dismissed Monica's rank the moment she spoke. He told them how Riley muttered about suspicious types on the drive to the call. He told them he felt sick when the gun fired, that he knew immediately what had happened. He handed over everything without hesitation, knowing the blue wall would crack beneath him the moment the truth left his mouth. At the police department. Riley sat in an interview room with 2 union attorneys and a growing sense of panic. He insisted his camera malfunctioned. He insisted Monica lunged at him with boiling water. He insisted he feared for his life. His statements shifted slightly each time he repeated them, as if the words could not keep up with the story he was trying to build. When investigators confronted him with the audio from Kevin's camera, his jaw tightened. He claimed Kevin's perspective was wrong. He claimed the angle distorted what happened. He claimed he thought he saw the pot rising, but the footage showed the opposite. It showed Riley lifting his weapon long before Monica moved. It showed fear, not threat, bias, not danger, and as the minutes passed, Riley's attorneys began to shift uneasily in their seats. They saw what the government saw. The case was collapsing beneath their client. Federal authorities prepared an arrest warrant. They studied the body cam footage again. They studied the timestamps. They studied the medical report provided by Dr. Elena Torres. Her documentation was exact. The angle of entry, the nerve damage, the proximity of the muzzle flash. She noted the absence of residue on Monica's hands, the lack of offensive marks. She testified that Monica's posture and wound placement indicated she had been facing slightly away from Riley, not toward him. At the time of the shot, her voice was steady as she laid out the medical truth. It was clear, unshakable, clinical, and devastating for Riley. At Fort Leonard Wood, Monica's commanding general monitored every development. He read the investigator's notes with a cold focus that left no room for doubt. He knew that turning off a body camera was an act of intention, not instinct, not fear. He prepared a formal statement outlining Monica's record, her service, and her character. His words were straightforward. Lieutenant Hayes has served this nation with honor. Her actions during the Afghanistan flood rescue reflect extraordinary courage. She has never raised her voice in anger at a fellow soldier. She has never violated a command. She has never compromised her integrity. She should never have been treated as anything less than an American officer. His statement spread quickly through official channels. Kevin Morales, meanwhile, faced the hardest nights of his life. His wife was days away from giving birth. He sat at the edge of his bed each night, listening to her sleep, wondering if he had destroyed his career by telling the truth. He wondered if Riley would retaliate. He wondered if his department would turn on him. But he also knew something deeper. He refused to live with a lie. He refused to bury the truth of what he saw. He refused to let a decorated soldier be blamed for her own injury. His quiet courage became the catalyst investigators needed. 19 days after the shooting, federal agents arrived at the Springfield Police Department. Riley was escorted out the back door in handcuffs, his head down, his face pale, his breath shallow. Reporters shouted questions from behind the barricades. He said nothing. For the first time since the shooting, his voice disappeared. Inside the courthouse, as his charges were read, the truth lay stacked in the folders on the prosecutor's desk. Body cam audio, medical analysis, military records, witness statements. Every piece pointed toward one unmistakable conclusion. This was not an accident. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a crime, and the nation was now watching. The trial began 11 months after the shooting, and by then the entire nation knew the name First Lieutenant Monica Hayes. She arrived each morning in full Army dress blues, her posture straight, her movements controlled, the silver bar on her shoulder gleaming beneath the courtroom lights. Her left ear remained bandaged for the first several weeks, then covered by a discreet protective shield as she healed. She walked with the quiet strength of someone who had already survived more than the courtroom could inflict. Veterans in the gallery stood when she entered. Journalists lowered their voices. Even the judge noted her composure. 3 jurors were veterans themselves, and when they saw her step into the room on the first day, they exchanged a look that needed no explanation. They knew what that uniform meant. They knew the weight it carried. They knew the dignity she brought with her. And they knew the responsibility now placed in their hands. Prosecutors moved with a steadiness that reflected both moral clarity and absolute conviction. They began with the 911 call. The courtroom fell silent when Monica's voice filled the speakers. Calm, steady, professional. This is First Lieutenant Monica Hayes, United States Army. I have a possible intruder at my residence. Her tone carried no fear, no aggression, only disciplined precision. The prosecutors then played Kevin Morales' body cam recording. Monica's greeting at the door, her raised hands, her identification, Riley's dismissive tone, Riley's escalating voice, Kevin's attempt to interject, and then the gunshot. Several jurors flinched when the shot cracked through the room, echoing off the walls. Monica sat still, her eyes forward, her breath steady, refusing to let them see any pain the memory stirred. When the prosecution called Dr. Elena Torres, the energy in the courtroom shifted. She spoke with the grounded authority of someone who had stood over 1,000 emergency beds. She described the shattered collarbone, the trajectory of the bullet, the severed auditory nerve. She stated plainly that Monica had been turning away when the shot was fired. She confirmed there was no physical evidence Monica attempted to attack anyone. Her voice did not rise. Her tone did not waver. She simply laid out the truth. The jury watched her with the focus of people who understood they were hearing something they could trust. Kevin Morales testified next. His hands shook slightly when he took the stand, but his voice remained steady. He recounted the drive to the house, Riley's comments on the way, the dismissive reaction to Monica's ID, and the moment he saw Riley lift the weapon. He admitted he froze. He admitted he failed to stop the shot. He admitted he would carry that moment with him for the rest of his life. Prosecutors allowed him to speak without interruption. The defense tried to undermine him, suggesting fear clouded his judgment, suggesting Monica's movement was ambiguous, suggesting his failure to stop Riley made him unreliable. Kevin did not respond with anger. He simply replayed the scene in words the way he saw it. "She never threatened us," he said quietly. "She never raised the pot. She was calm. She was respectful. She identified herself. And he shot her anyway." The room held its breath. Even Riley shifted in his chair. Riley took the stand on the 8th day of the trial. His voice lacked the confidence he once used so easily. He repeated his claims. He feared for his life. He thought she was attacking. He believed she was using the pot as a weapon. Prosecutors confronted him with every inconsistency, from his initial statement to his second, to the one he practiced with his attorneys. They asked repeatedly why he turned off his camera. His explanations unraveled quickly. He claimed it malfunctioned. They produced evidence showing manual deactivation. He claimed he did not hear Monica identify herself. They played the audio again. Monica's voice unmistakably clear. He claimed Kevin's angle distorted the scene. They played the footage in slow motion, then normal speed, then frame by frame. Riley's expression tightened with each playback. The jurors watched him with a growing sense of understanding. They did not see fear in the footage. They saw bias. They saw impulse. And they saw a man who never paused long enough to see the human being standing in front of him when it came time for Monica to testify. The room shifted again. She stood with a soldier's bearing, saluted the judge out of instinct, then apologized softly. The judge nodded, recognizing the discipline. She walked to the witness stand in deliberate steps, taking care not to show the lingering stiffness in her shoulder. She spoke clearly. Though her left ear could not hear the questions without the assistance device provided, she described the noise in the kitchen, the call to 911, the moment she opened the door, the moment Riley dismissed her rank. She did not exaggerate. She did not speculate. She did not dramatize what happened. She spoke with the simplicity of someone who had lived through the moment and did not need to embellish the truth. When prosecutors asked if she lunged, she responded in a firm, even voice, "No." I turned slightly. I moved slowly. I explained what the pot was. I never made a threatening motion. She did not look at the jurors. She looked at Riley. She held his gaze as she answered every question. Her silence between statements spoke louder than the words themselves. The general who commanded her unit attended the trial every day. He sat in full uniform in the front row, an unspoken reminder of who Monica was. Not just a civilian, not just a victim, but one of his officers, one of the nation's officers. His presence carried weight that no attorney could match. Every morning he rose when she entered. Every evening he saluted her before she left. The jurors noticed. The press noticed. The court noticed. Closing arguments came 11 days into the trial. Prosecutors laid out the trajectory of events with clarity. A decorated soldier called for help, identified herself, stood still, followed every instruction, and was shot for no reason other than the shooter's own bias and impulse. The defense attempted to argue fear, chaos, split-second misjudgment. But the body cam audio, Kevin's, not Riley's, had already dismantled that argument. The jurors retired to deliberate. They returned in less than 4 hours. The verdict was unanimous, guilty on all counts. The courtroom remained silent as each charge was read. Civil rights violation under color of law, intentional infliction of bodily harm, reckless discharge of a firearm, obstruction due to deactivated body camera. The judge reviewed the severity of the injuries, the lies, the attempted cover-up, the national impact, then delivered the sentence, 18 years in federal prison, no parole. Riley's shoulders sagged. His attorneys lowered their eyes. The general placed a steadying hand on Monica's back. For the first time in nearly a year, Monica exhaled without pain. But the story was far from over. The nation was still turning its eyes toward her. The military was preparing its own response. Congress was asking questions. And across the country, departments were bracing for what her voice would soon mean. The trial was finished. The reckoning was not. In the months after the verdict, Monica Hayes returned to active duty with wounds that had not yet healed but resolve that had never been stronger. She was still a first lieutenant in the United States Army, still bound by the discipline that shaped every step of her career. And she approached recovery with the same stubborn will that once carried her through deployments overseas. Her shoulder remained stiff. Her sleep was uneven. Her left ear heard nothing at all. But her posture was straight, her salute crisp, and her voice steady when superiors asked whether she wished to continue service. "Yes, sir," she answered every time. "I remain mission ready." Word of the trial and the national attention surrounding it followed her everywhere, but she refused to let it define her. She told commanders she did not want pity. She wanted structure, purpose, and clarity. They gave her all three. 2 months later, she received an unexpected call from her chain of command. A congressional panel had requested her presence in Washington. The House Judiciary Committee was holding hearings on law enforcement accountability, body camera policies, and the treatment of active duty personnel by local police. They wanted to hear from someone who had lived the consequences firsthand. They wanted her. Monica listened to the request in silence, her hands folded neatly on the desk in front of her. She had spoken in court. She had spoken to investigators. But Congress was different. Congress would place her voice on record for the nation. She paused only briefly, then nodded. "Yes, sir, I will testify." When the official orders arrived, she ironed her dress blues with careful precision, polished her silver bar until it reflected the overhead light, and prepared herself for the weight of what she was about to do. Flying into Washington was not a moment of glamour for her. It was a moment of solemn duty. Soldiers met her at the airport, saluted her, then escorted her to a waiting vehicle. She did not speak during the drive. She sat upright, steady, her right ear taking in the low hum of traffic while her left remained silent. She thought of the kitchen, the pot of water, Riley's voice, the gunshot that changed the soundscape of her life forever. She thought of how her world tilted that night, and she thought of how much larger the mission had become since then. When the car stopped at the Capitol complex, she stepped out and adjusted the edge of her uniform coat. A staff member guided her down the hallway. Another opened the door to the hearing room, and then, as she entered, every person inside rose to their feet. She did not look at the cameras. She looked only at the committee when called forward. She moved with measured steps to the witness table. She placed both hands on the surface, stood at parade rest without being asked, and offered a formal salute before lowering herself into the chair. Members of Congress watched her closely. Some nodded in quiet respect. Others seemed unsettled by the weight she carried simply by being present. When the chairman invited her to speak, she did not shuffle papers. She did not look down. She rose again and delivered 3 sentences in a voice that carried more authority than volume. "I survived combat to be shot in my own kitchen. I do not want your pity. I want your change." The words struck the room with the clarity of a bell rung in still air. There was no anger in her tone, no bitterness, only truth. And the truth moved through the chamber with a force that drowned out every other sound. Questions followed. But she answered only what she needed to answer. She described the moment she called 911. She described her identification as a first lieutenant. She described the shot. She described the permanent deafness in her left ear. She explained what turning off a body camera meant for accountability. She made no accusations beyond the facts. She did not speak of Riley beyond what was proven. She spoke instead about responsibility, training, federal oversight, the gap between local practice and national expectation. Her clarity elevated the hearing from routine testimony to national reckoning. News outlets replayed her sentences for days. Editorials invoked her name. Veterans groups issued statements supporting her. Her testimony shifted legislative momentum that had been stagnant for years. Within weeks, Illinois passed a new statute known informally as Monica's Law. It required body cameras to remain on during all police interactions, and intentional deactivation became a felony punishable by prison time. The governor referenced her testimony during the signing ceremony. Though she chose not to attend, she remained on duty, focused on her next assignment. Nationally, the Department of Defense issued a new directive. Any incident involving an active duty service member and local law enforcement would now trigger an automatic joint investigation between federal and military authorities. No more waiting for local reviews. No more departmental discretion. The uniform she wore became a shield backed by federal mandate. Meanwhile, Kevin Morales quietly stepped away from patrol duty. He did not resign from law enforcement entirely. Instead, he accepted an offer few officers had ever been given. The Army and Department of Justice were jointly designing a training curriculum focused on de-escalation, cross-cultural risk assessment, and recognition of military identifiers. They needed an instructor who had lived through failure and chosen truth over loyalty. Kevin became the first civilian military co-instructor in the program. He taught recruits how to slow a moment down instead of accelerating it, how to distinguish threat from presence, how to listen when someone identifies themselves, how not to repeat the night that fractured a life. He carried Monica's name into every classroom. At Fort Leonard Wood, Monica continued therapy and training. She practiced hearing reconstruction exercises for her right ear. She learned to adjust her balance, which changed after the nerve damage. She attended command briefings, updated policies for integrating military personnel with civilian responders, and wrote recommendations for the Army's review panel. Her colleagues treated her with quiet respect, not because she had become a public figure, but because she never allowed the tragedy to bend her posture or dull her integrity. As the months passed, she understood that the story had grown far beyond her. It was now a national reference, a case studied in academies, a point of debate in legislatures, a symbol of what accountability demanded. Her name appeared in policy documents. Her testimony was used in training slides. Her picture hung in the Pentagon's leadership corridor for several weeks as part of a temporary exhibit on service and sacrifice. She did not seek recognition. She sought one thing, that no other soldier, no other citizen, would face the moment she faced in her own kitchen, from Springfield to Washington, from the trial to the Capitol hearing. Her voice had traveled farther than she ever imagined, and though she carried the silence in her left ear everywhere she went, she had become something the nation could not ignore. Her wound had turned her into a force. Her testimony had turned her into a catalyst, and soon, her next assignment would turn her into something even larger. Monica Hayes never planned to stay in the Army forever, but the night she was shot changed the direction of her service in a way no deployment ever had. Months after the congressional hearing, she sat alone in her office reviewing her separation paperwork, forms she had once filled out with quiet certainty. She rested her hand on the folder, feeling the weight of the decision she was about to make. The documents no longer felt right. They no longer matched the person she had become. She closed the folder, slid it aside, and picked up the assignment orders that had arrived that same morning. The Army wanted her to serve in a new role, liaison to law enforcement agencies across the nation. The mission was simple in words and heavy in purpose. She would bridge two worlds that rarely understood one another. She would speak for those in uniform who were not protected when they came home. She would help teach the people who carry badges how to recognize the weight of the rank she nearly died proving. She read the orders again, then signed her name at the bottom without hesitation. She was not leaving the army. She was stepping into a larger battlefield, one measured not in miles, but in mindset. Her first assignment took her to a regional police training academy in Missouri. She arrived in full dress uniform, the silver bar gleaming on her shoulder, her posture straight, her movements precise. She walked into the auditorium with a steady gait, balancing the internal silence of her left ear with the familiar rhythm of her right. Recruits whispered among themselves when they recognized her from the news. Some looked nervous, others curious, a few looked skeptical. She didn't try to soften the moment. She didn't clear her throat or warm the crowd. Instead, she walked to the front of the room, lifted a simple white placard from her briefcase, and held it chest high for everyone to read. The sign carried only 2 lines. "I cannot hear you, but I am still in uniform, so you will hear me." She let the words settle over the room before lowering the sign. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was attentive. It was respectful. And it was exactly the silence she needed. She spoke slowly, not with dramatic flourish, but with deliberate clarity. She told them about the night she called for help. She told them about the pot of boiling water she never lifted. She told them how quickly a misunderstanding can turn into a tragedy when someone refuses to listen. She explained what identification means when a soldier states their rank. She spoke about discipline, restraint, and the responsibility of carrying a weapon. She told them what happens to a nation when trust breaks, and how much work it takes to rebuild that trust one encounter at a time. She did not raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her presence carried the message more strongly than volume ever could. When she finished, the recruits rose instinctively. Some saluted without thinking. Others stood with their hands at their sides, unsure how to express what they felt. Monica simply nodded once and dismissed them. She repeated that training session in academies across the country. Some rooms were filled with eager listeners. Others held officers who folded their arms and leaned back, skeptical of anything that might challenge the way they had been trained. But the moment she rose in her dress blues, every room fell still. Every audience recognized the quiet authority she carried. And every time she held up the same sign, "I cannot hear you, but I am still in uniform, so you will hear me." Something shifted. It was never dramatic. It was never sudden. But it was unmistakable. She could see it in the way recruits sat straighter, in the way instructors changed the tone of their next lesson, in the way some officers approached her afterward, embarrassed by their own assumptions, grateful for the chance to ask questions, humbled by the reminder that the person calling 911 might be someone they ought to salute. Her work expanded quickly. She began consulting on federal training guidelines. She worked with the Department of Justice on de-escalation frameworks. She briefed senior military leaders on communication gaps between soldiers and local law enforcement. She co-authored a national curriculum used in multiple states. She traveled constantly, always carrying the same uniform and always placing the same sign at the front of every auditorium. And everywhere she went, she saw echoes of herself in the young recruits. People who wanted structure, clarity, purpose. People who did not yet understand that a single moment of misjudgment could define their entire career. Back in Springfield, her shooting site became a place of quiet remembrance. Soldiers from her old unit petitioned to install a small plaque near the corner of the kitchen wall where the pot had fallen. After months of review, the Army approved it. A group of engineers traveled to Illinois and mounted the plaque with reverence, smoothing their hands across its surface before stepping back. The inscription was precise and solemn. Here, a United States Army first lieutenant called for help and was answered with a bullet. She survived, so we would never forget. Monica visited the plaque only once at first. She stood in front of it in silence, her hands clasped behind her back, her uniform crisp. She read the words slowly, allowing each sentence to settle. It was not a monument to pain. It was a reminder of purpose. She touched the metal lightly, then stepped away. She did not linger. She did not cry. She simply nodded, as if saluting the memory of the woman she once was in that moment. The woman who lay on that floor but refused to let that be the end of her story. As the years passed, the country grew familiar with the sight of her standing in front of a classroom, in front of a congressional subcommittee, or in front of a police graduation ceremony. She never sought attention. She never accepted praise lightly. But she became something rare in the national landscape, a steady voice for accountability that did not bend toward rage or bitterness. Her message was simple. Respect must be practiced, not assumed. And people listened because she embodied the principle every time she put on her uniform. First Lieutenant Monica Hayes never regained hearing in her left ear. The silence remained with her every moment of her life. But that silence no longer represented loss. It represented a shift, a threshold, a reminder of the night she refused to be defined by fear. And in that silence, she found her new mission. She found the voice the nation needed. She found the strength to stand in front of thousands and remind them that a uniform is not a target and a badge is not permission. She taught them that listening can save a life. She taught them that restraint is a form of courage. She taught them that justice requires vigilance. And across the country, in classrooms and briefing halls and training centers, recruits stood straighter when she entered, saluted longer when she left, and carried her message with them into every shift. The lieutenant who nearly died in her own kitchen became the lieutenant who never retired, and because she never gave up her post, America finally learned how to salute. Thank you for listening to this story. If it moved you, please subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps these stories reach more people.